In today's show, we scour the rumor mill for the latest on Malcolm Brogdon and Jerami Grant and all things trade in your Portland Trail Blazers. Well, Locked On Blazers, let's get into it.
You are Locked On Trailblazers, your daily Portland Trailblazers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, world? It's your past first point guard and Trailblazers reporter, Mike Richmond. You're listening to another episode of Locked On Blazers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, available wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. Thanks for making this show your first listen, coming at you each and every weekday, Monday through Friday. So make it a part of your daily routine. Make it your first listen. Tell your friends to do the same. As Locked On Blazers, your team every day. In today's episode, it's all things trade rumors, trade speculation, trade excitement. I have gone to the rumor mills, scoured them for the latest info surrounding your Portland Trailblazers, and I'll bring it to you here as promised. We are, as I am recording this, officially 1 month away from the February 8th trade deadline. You are listening to Tuesday, January 9th show. Appreciate you. Let's get into all the trade stuff, talking Malcolm Brogdon, talk Jerami Grant. We'll talk Jonathan Kuminga a little bit too, because I know many of you are thirsty for Jonathan Kuminga trade ideas. I've seen the email inbox. JK's got you excited. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. But first, a little bit of news up front. The Blazers announced today that Moses Brown has a fractured left wrist, and he's set to have surgery, and he will be a timeline determined for his return will be determined after the surgery. Just quick research on this. LaMelo Ball sustained a similar injury in 2021, missed about 5 weeks. Naz Reid, same injury last year at the end of March heading into the playoffs. He was slated to miss 6 weeks, but the T-Wolves season ended about 4 weeks later, 4.5 weeks later, so he didn't get back, didn't have a chance to get back on the court. So I would say look for that classic 4 to 6 week turnaround for Mo Brown following surgery. Stinks for him. It means like he's just, Blazers kept him on the team, so he got his money. Happy for him to get that guaranteed contract, assuming that he's on the team for a couple more days and his contract becomes fully guaranteed. I believe it will. And bummer for him because you want him to stay healthy. Blazers already thin front court remains thin with DeAndre Ayton still hurt. And it's Duop Reith and Ibu Baji time. Duop's been fun. Baji's fun. Blazers aren't very good up front right now, but they have some entertaining options as they continue to press forward. That's your latest news. Let's start with Malcolm Brogdon. Then we'll talk a little Jonathan Kuminga. Then we'll talk about Jerami Grant and kind of what I think the Blazers might end up doing. But Brogdon, if you're a longtime listener to the podcast or a regular listener to the podcast, or as we call you here, everydayers, shout out to my everydayers. I appreciate you listening. We do it Monday through Friday, so you can make it a part of your daily routine and listen. And then you have heard me say this, is that I think the Blazers basically have to trade Malcolm Brogdon because they've got players behind him that need playing time. And like we saw this specifically against the Nets on Sunday, is that the Blazers needed to win a game, and Chauncey Billups turned to Malcolm Brogdon to help him win a basketball game, and that's like good coaching because they did end up winning, and Malcolm Brogdon had 8 points in overtime. But just the fact that it isn't Scoot Henderson you're making that choice for, it's like, what is the point of this season? It's about development. The Blazers need a win in the worst way, so I don't really fault Billups for doing that, and at some point you just coach the roster you have. So what the Blazers got to do is give him a different roster so he can play Scoot and play Anthony Simons and play Shaedon Sharpe and get them all sort of the 35 plus minutes and just go for it and have those combos play together, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's important for the remainder of the season. So I think it's important that they trade Malcolm Brogdon. Also, just like armchair psychiatrist stuff, I don't think Malcolm Brogdon's had great body language the last couple weeks. I'm sure he's ready to go play on a better team. And from some of the reporting, better teams are courting him. According to, I don't think they're courting him. That just sounded good, but it's nonsense. That's not what's happening. At least one good team is considering or likely considering making a push. According to Jake Fisher of Yahoo Sports, he reported this January 5th, that the New York Knicks are likely to explore deals to upgrade the roster that would almost certainly include Malcolm Brogdon of the Portland Trail Blazers. the week of Christmas, when the Knicks kind of got trade season started by making the move for OG Anunoby, Adrian Wojnarowski kind of did some reporting on the various ESPN television and web programs, mostly TV, that I ended up watching on YouTube on NBA Today, that the Knicks were looking for another sort of veteran creator type who could help them, who wouldn't have long-term money. Well, Brogdon has this season and one remaining. It's not long-term money. It's relatively reasonable at $22 million, and he would certainly fit that mold. And also Woj mentioned that there's just not going to be a lot of sellers at the trade deadline. There's a lot of buyers, but not a lot of sellers. This isn't a super sexy draft class, so there aren't a bunch of teams that are like, hey, let's not finish in the play-in. Let's make sure we lose. There's not going to teams chasing ping pong balls necessarily. So it's going to be more teams in the hunt for longer. When there's more teams in the hunt for longer, there's just there's more buyers in the market. That probably benefits the Blazers to some extent because they are likely to be sellers, and Brogdon is someone they would try to sell. But it means that they are going to drive up the asking price. And according to Adrian Wojnarowski, it doesn't mean that nothing's going to happen. It just means that because the asking price is going to be high from the limited number of teams asking to sell, it could be less action than we've seen in years past. But he thinks there'll still be activity at the trade deadline regardless. So specifically with the Knicks, and as their interest in Malcolm Brogdon as reported by Jake Fisher and speculated openly by a million people who have access to Trade Machine across and can look at NBA rosters across the world, the Knicks have 4 of their own first-round picks and 4 first-round picks owed to them from various other teams from prior trades, including Detroit and Dallas. They've got first-round picks to trade. Whether they want to cash those in for Malcolm Brogdon or they want to hold them out for amorphous future star remains to be seen. But if the Knicks wanted to get involved, there's a very simple trade idea. Evan Fournier plus a first. I think Fournier has a team option on his contract for next season, so he's essentially an expiring contract. He makes enough money to make the trade legal, but not enough money the Blazers would save a little bit of money. But more importantly, they wouldn't go into the tax line. By making the roster decisions they made, they're about $4 million below the tax line. So it's important that they don't take back more than $4 million in any trade they're making because they do not want to end up a tax team, or they won't end up a tax team, I think, moreover. So Fournier plus a first works. That works for Malcolm Brogdon. That isn't what I would pursue. I'm not in charge. I'm a man in his basement who has a series of curved brim hats he wears while recording a podcast. But I would not prioritize the financial flexibility that Fournier gives. I would want a player that you could at least take a flyer on. The first round pick's sexy. If it's the Pistons' first round pick, it's protected, so you're not going to get the first pick in the draft or whatever. But you could a future first. The Dallas pick maybe has some appeal. Even the Knicks' own pick in this upcoming draft has some appeal. I would maybe say, hey, how about a 2025 unprotected pick for Brogdon, or lightly protected, say top 10 protected. So you end up a Knicks pick that's probably not going to be in the top 10 next year anyways because they're a pretty good basketball team. You end up getting their pick outright at 22 again or whatever it is. I think that's fair compensation for Brogdon. As I mentioned in the past, I think something like the Josh Hart package is a reasonable ask for Brogdon, which is a young player you take a flyer on, Cam Reddish, and a lightly protected first-round pick, which the Blazers took Chris Murray 23rd overall. It's totally reasonable package. I think that Brogdon would get the same deal. Fournier just gets you out from under the money, and you can move into the future without, with a little bit of more financial wiggle room. But if I'm trading Brogdon, I want a player that could potentially help in the future. That's what I want. That's what myself and my various dad hats wants. So I've cooked up my preferred Malcolm Brogdon trade. The other obvious suitor with anyone with Trade Machine and ability to view NBA rosters, which I am. I actually have access to the internet right here in this very basement. I can view NBA rosters. I follow the league relatively closely, and I know that the Orlando Magic need a point guard. That's their area of weakness. Jalen Suggs might make an all-defensive team. He's really good. Markelle Fultz, they just can't get healthy with consistency. Cole Anthony is your classic score-first, go-for-it type of guard. They need a lead guard, a true point guard, and maybe someone who could take some of the scoring pressure off of Paolo Banchero a little bit, who's been awesome on the Magic's West Coast trip. And as a side note, I love when an East Coast team goes on a West Coast trip because after bedtime in my house, so when I put my young child to bed, then I can watch the Magic like 3 nights in a week. It's incredible. Easy peasy. Don't have to watch them on record. So I think the Magic are obvious suitors. It should be in the point guard market. A lot of people want to connect Anthony Simons to the Magic, and sure, go for it. I wouldn't prioritize for right now. I don't think the Blazers need to trade Anthony Simons. I think at some point it might come up, but I do not think it is in the next 4 weeks. That is not how I view their situation whatsoever. Reasonable minds can disagree. So my favorite Malcolm Brogdon trade I've cooked up right here. Wendell Carter Jr. and Gary Harris for Malcolm Brogdon and Moses Brown. No draft compensation because you're getting the flyer on Wendell Carter Jr. Gary Harris has been a really solid vet for the Magic, and maybe the Blazers can see what what the future might be with him, but he also has expiring money. But Wendell Carter's on a reasonable contract. This trade keeps the Blazers below the tax line. You don't have to haggle for picks because you're getting a 24-year-old center with upside. The Magic have been leaning on Mo Wagner. They've been leaning on Goga Bitadze. Wendell Carter Jr. is having a down season. He has had trouble staying healthy, and the Magic have priorities to be good right now. There was a report from Mark Stein on January 5th, that's last Friday as I'm recording this, that there was belief from teams outside of the Magic, rival organizations, but teams who have been contacting the Magic, that they thought that potentially Wendell Carter could be available via trade. Is that the Magic would be willing to listen to offers for Wendell Carter, and for my money, taking a flyer on a versatile, at least in theory, a versatile on both ends big like Wendell Carter, who's shown some flashes of being a very good young player, and you move forward with him under contract for several seasons at 24, who can provide depth behind Ayton, who can, if Ayton's going to miss time, grow with it. You can grow with the team, make decisions and all those things. Wendell Carter, Gary Harris for Brogdon and Moses Brown. That is my preferred trade. And don't say I've never gone to the trade machine. Some of you think that I hate the trade machine. I make them when they count. I'm like Shaq in free throws. Make them when they count. Okay, let's talk Jonathan Kuminga. He doesn't want to play for Steve Kerr anymore. Could the Blazers maybe get involved, and what might that look like? Let's talk about that in the second segment. But first, I want to tell you that this episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. If you've thought about starting therapy, maybe consider giving BetterHelp a try. Therapy can be really useful for developing the tools you need to be your best self. Therapy can be super helpful. You just need to talk to someone with a trauma in your life, an acute traumatic event, but it can also be helpful just getting better at navigating the day-to-day world that we live in, and having a therapist, having conversations regularly with a therapist can help you develop the tools you need to start improving how you go about interacting with the world. So if you want to develop those tools, if you want to work towards improving yourself or improving your experiences, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and it's suited for your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire, you get matched with a licensed therapist, and then you can switch therapists anytime, no additional charge. Celebrate the progress you've already made. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. All right. So Malcolm Brogdon might have suitors, and there might not be a lot of buyers on the market. Blazers might be one of the, or there might be not a lot of sellers on the market. Blazers might be one of the few sellers because a lot of teams might be buying. One of those teams that might be buying, but in a curious way, is the Golden State Warriors. It came out late last week, in a report from The Athletic, Shams Charania and Anthony Slater, that Jonathan Kuminga had basically lost faith in Steve Kerr giving him the minutes and playing time and role to best suit his career. I'm laughing because when a player of Jonathan Kuminga's caliber goes to the media to be like, trade me. Okay, they might not, but at least you complained behind the scenes. Good for you, or good for your team, good for your agency to go ahead and complain behind the scenes. I will say Jonathan Kuminga deserved to play more. Steve Kerr has a tough road to travel with veterans that he feels like he owes for the things that they've done over the last decade versus young players, and they're trying to be good, and they're blah, 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 blah. Has Kerr handled it well? Probably not, but Kuminga's folks complaining in the media is funny to me. Nonetheless, Jonathan Kuminga's 21. He's big. He can play both forward spots. He's got real defensive potential, although I don't think he's a very good defender right now, but real defensive potential. And he puts pressure on the rim because he's a really good athlete. And when he's been given time this year, he showed flashes that he's improved significantly over his first couple years in the league. 21-year-old, hyper-athletic, multi-positional forward is like the dream player for the Blazers to acquire. The dream player. That's why so many of you jumped in the email inbox, lockedonblazerspod@gmail.com, and sent me emails. So many of you. Probably 6 individual emails plus a couple others that were like, hey, you can talk about this on the show? But like, thanks. I love y'all, and I love that when something exciting happens, you send me an email. That's the best place to reach me, and it's truly enjoyable to go back and forth with folks in that space. So thanks for sending me your thoughts there. The short answer of it is that I don't think the Blazers can trade for Jonathan Kuminga. He makes $6 million, which is a big complication, and the Blazers don't have great mid-level trade like money to trade because most of their like interesting young players either don't make enough money or are it's like spoken for. It's like you're not going to trade Scoot Henderson or whatever for, and not that he even would be interested, but right, like the people who make sort of that mid-range money, Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe are not on the board. You want to add to them, not trade them actually. And then they've got vets that make a bunch of money, and then they've got Anthony Simons, who is like not appealing to specifically Golden State's needs. So they don't have exactly the money to make it work. Jonathan Kuminga only makes $6 million, so matching that money isn't easy. So the way that you would match it is to add in the 3 years and $90 million left on Andrew Wiggins' contract, or the potentially expiring contract of Chris Paul. So the Blazers could, is there a way to get creative and trade, say, Jerami Grant to the Warriors for Chris Paul and Jonathan Kuminga? Yeah, that's not that hard to cook up. Not hard to cook up and make it work for everybody financially. Bummer for Chris Paul. Chris Paul has a fully non-guaranteed contract for next season, so he's essentially expiring money, and he's just got hurt, and he's fractured his hand. Is going to be out till after the trade deadline. So the Warriors probably need another guard a little bit. A lot of Corey Joseph coming in our future. Maybe just play Moses Moody. I don't know. I guess they need other people who can dribble, and they're a little light on that. But Pods can dribble a little bit. I think they'll be fine. It's not an easy match, and the complication further is that the Blazers own the Warriors' draft pick this season. Do they want to make the Warriors better in order to get a slightly worse draft pick? Or would they rather say, y'all figure it out over there, and if you end up missing the playoffs and giving us another lottery pick, we're not going to be too worried about it. Like, we don't want to make you too much better in order to end up with, say, the 22nd pick or the 19th pick in the draft when we might end up with the 7th pick in the draft. We'd rather just have, 5 and 7 in this year's draft and keep it moving than help improve the Warriors for Jonathan Kuminga. Could you argue that Jonathan Kuminga is better than any player you would draft at 7 or 19 for the Warriors? Yeah, you could probably make that argument, right? And he's 21, so he's not wholly older than a rookie you would get last season or for next season, excuse me. So like, I could see the appeal. But it also means if I can see the appeal and you, dear listeners, can see the appeal, that Jonathan Kuminga is going to have interest, right? And if the Warriors really wanted to trade him, they would have suitors beyond what the Blazers can offer. And the Blazers don't have, like I said, don't have super enticing parts or good money. The money is the real problem for the Blazers. They don't have good money to send back that makes it easy. It's just, they don't have that. They don't have that simple player making $7 million that, like, hey, They traded Nazir Little, right? They don't have that necessarily. And then it's like, what do the Warriors want from Kuminga? They probably want a vet who can help them win because they're trying to be good right now. Well, that gets into the money and the complications. And that gets to the actual logic of the situation. Mark Stein, in a newsletter he wrote today, the Stein Line, on January 8th, he published this actually yesterday when you're listening to this. Subscribe to Stein's Substack. It's really good. It's an essential Substack. There aren't a ton of them, but his is one of the essential Substacks. The rest you can find right here on the pod. I'll subscribe so you don't have to. But Stein he's really good at this, and he says that he reports that the Warriors are probably more open to not trading Jonathan Kuminga. but trading the guy that he doesn't play well with. And that's one of the big issues here. He just doesn't fit well with Andrew Wiggins. They haven't gotten much out of that duo together. So playing those wings together hasn't worked out. And so then they keep having to make decisions of who they're going to play at the end of games. And it's always going to be Klay Thompson. So then it's Wiggins or Kuminga. And it's often been Wiggins. And hence Kuminga's frustration, wanting out and saying that he doesn't trust Steve Kerr to be the steward of his career or whatever it might be. But according to Stein, they don't want to trade Kuminga because they also know that he's 21 and enticing. They would be much more open to trading Andrew Wiggins and his $90 million, $30 million a year, $90 million in 3 years left in his contract. Good luck. Salary dumping Andrew Wiggins might prove challenging. We'll see. If there's more buyers than sellers, we'll see. Would someone take on Wiggins' money for the right type of sweeteners? Yes, they absolutely would. Do the Warriors have those type of sweeteners to make it happen? Maybe. Not clear. It depends on kind of what teams want. But it just seems like the Blazers are unlikely suitors for Kuminga. It seems like because they just don't have a great package the obvious package to put together that isn't like taking on Chris Paul's money, but you can debate whether you think that has value or not. And that Kuminga would, just like they have, if they could call 28 other teams, they would call 28 other teams. Because what the Blazers do have is they have a trade exception that they could absorb Kuminga into. Would giving the Warriors back their own pick this year, absorbing Jonathan Kuminga and allowing the Warriors to facilitate trades otherwise work in some manner? Yeah. Would the Warriors want that? I don't know. Would they want to just straight up get off of Kuminga's money just in exchange for their own draft pick? That doesn't seem super appealing. It's certainly that is the most realistic way that the Blazers could end up with Kuminga, is that they absorb him into that trade exception and send back the Warriors pick. I wouldn't bet on it happening. It seems relatively unlikely, but certainly that is a way that it could happen. Okay, let's talk Jerami Grant, the last sort of domino in the Blazers trade saga, and the last rumor that I have milled for you on today's show. We will do that to close the show. Jerami Grant getting traded? Let's talk about it. First, let's talk about FanDuel, America's number one sports book. Listen, NFL playoffs start this weekend, and FanDuel wants to give you some money. $150 in bonus bets when you visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make any $5 bet, win or lose. Get $150 in bonus bets to work with. FanDuel, super easy to use. The app is super intuitive. They got bets on everything you could want. So once you make your $5 bet, once you have a little fun watching the NFL playoffs this week and make your $5 bet, get your bonus bets. You can just use it to wager on anything. You get that in-app free money to wager on things like live in-game parlays or incredibly elaborate NFL weekend parlays, incredibly elaborate multi-sport NHL, NBA, NFL parlays. Just bet $1 to win a whole bunch of money. Have the type of fun that legalized gambling allows you to have, or bet on player props or futures bets or whatever it is. So if you want to get involved in America's number one sportsbook, go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. One more time for you. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. It's FanDuel, an official sponsor of the NFL. Still a pass first point guard. I'm still Mike Richmond, and you are still listening to Locked On Blazers. Talk a little Malcolm Brogdon, talk a little Jonathan Kuminga. Let's talk Jerami Grant to finish this bad boy. JG, pretty good player. Would be really helpful if Jerami Grant gets into a complimentary role where he's not getting like 4 direct post-ups a game to like go to work in the mid-post with the Blazers. He would be like legitimately enticing because he can really shoot, he can score, he can attack in isolation situations, and he's a tough shot maker. And if your offense didn't have to live or wasn't unfortunately built to live off of a diet of tough Jerami Grant shots, and he was your 4th option or 3rd option, and he was like this tertiary part, really valuable. Jerami Grant would have value to good teams. But that means the Blazers just aren't going to trade him for nothing. I think it has been reported in market a couple times by Sean Highkin and later by Danny Morang that like the Blazers aren't interested in trading Jerami Grant. And while I believe that reporting wholeheartedly, I think that it means I read that as aren't interested in trading Jerami Grant unless. And unless is that sweetheart offer, right? Is the 2 first-round picks and something. You get that call for Jerami Grant, and you do it in a heartbeat. The Blazers would not hesitate, or at least I'm not reporting that, my speculation, wouldn't hesitate for 2 first-round picks an interesting young player for Jerami Grant in a heartbeat. You're just not getting that deal. You're not getting that deal for Jerami Grant because he's not that type of player. But like, the Blazers aren't in a rush to trade Jerami Grant. If you're a longtime listener to the program, you know that I have been speculating this since the beginning of the season, that Grant is not a player that they would rush out to trade after they sign him to that contract, because there's not like if you trade Jerami Grant, there's like this young starting player waiting behind him to play. Jabari Walker is an interesting young player, but he's not quite there yet as an NBA starter, and he might never be an NBA starter. He's probably going to be a long-term, really solid role player in the league, but the offense for him just isn't quite there yet on that level. And the Blazers, they don't need to be like, they're already pretty bad as is, right? Like, you've watched them play, you've seen the record. They don't need to get rid of Jerami Grant's money in order to maximize losing, right? They're going to be the 6th worst team in the NBA. Just if they stand here and do nothing, they'll probably be the 6th worst team in the NBA. So like, there's no tanking incentive, and there's no like roster incentive clear the way by trading Jerami Grant like there is for Brogdon, where there's obviously like playing time crunch. There's just not that much incentive to trade Jerami Grant immediately. If the Blazers get a good offer, sure. But if it's not there, it seems obvious that they can just wait. He's under contract for 4 more seasons after this one. He's yet to celebrate his 30th birthday. He's not ancient. He's older, but he's not ancient by any means. And he's like, he can still really shoot it. He's still going to be, long and helpful to some other team in the future. Like, he's got the sort of positional length that you want. He just doesn't rebound. So if you have rebounding shored up a little bit, or you can, or if you're using him in a different role where it's not going to be like, hey, he has to start at point guard and play or start at power forward and play all these minutes, or we're going to get killed on the glass, you can figure it out. Or there's been some teams that have been decent with leaning on offense recently on championships, and offense wins titles in the modern NBA. It's flipped after the last few years, and get Jerami Grant. If a good team juices their lineup with Jerami Grant's offensive production, that might put you over the top. So, sure, I think we'll hear more Jerami Grant rumors, including this one from Shams Charania, who reported today on January 8th that Dallas had kicked the tires on Jerami Grant, but the asking price was too high. And the good thing about doing this program and having access to the Locked On network is that I already did this show. Friday show. If you're an everyday listener to the program, I had we did a crossover episode with Nick Angstad of Locked On Mavs, and we opened the show with 10 minutes of talk on what a Jerami Grant trade would look like to the Mavs. And I mentioned right there, as we kind of walked out through the specifics, is that the Mavs just don't have great stuff to trade. They only have 1 first-round pick available to trade, and they just don't have like a lot of intriguing players. So it's like, to make the money work, it's the Blazers have to take back Maxi Kleber or Rashawn Holmes or Tim Hardaway Jr. Two of those 3 players almost certainly have to come back in the trade. And then it's a young player. Is it Josh Green and his contract, or is it Olivier Maxence Prosper? If Blazers, I ask for both. I say, Max and Green, please. I'll take 1 Olivier Maxence Prosper and 1 Josh Green and 1 of the big contracts. Call it Tim Hardaway Jr. off your hands for your problems, and you can also throw in a lightly protected first round pick because you only got 1 to trade, and that's what I want for Jerami Grant. And the Mavs say, nope. And you keep it moving, because that's going to be the ask. It's not salary relief and a couple second round picks. Like the Blazers, maybe they get down the line. Maybe they end up trading Jerami Grant in 2 years for salary relief and a couple second round picks. And you say, wow, why didn't they move sooner? And sure, we'll have that conversation when we get there, assuming that I'm still talking into this microphone, or a new microphone, but this podcast. But for now, I don't think there's incentive for the Blazers to rush out and make that trade. So it's like teams are going to have to blow them away. And if the Mavs did their due diligence and said, hey, that's too much, and the Blazers said, cool, too much is what we're asking for right now, then you keep them moving. You value your players at a certain level, and you don't make trades without valuing them at that level. I think that's sort of been Cronin's MO, except when he first got the job and he just decided to tear it down at all costs and just started trading people for salary relief. When he's cycled out of that to this next sort of place, he's kind of clearly said, Josh Hart is for CJ McCollum, we want a first round pick, and we want young veterans. For Josh Hart, we want a protected first round pick. Like that's the price. Let's move forward with it. And I think that's kind of how he'll approach it. Whether Joe Cronin can use that approach to build a really competitive roster. That's the point of the next several seasons. But for now, I think that is a pragmatic approach to take with Jerami Grant. Two more things before we get out of here. One, I want you to consider why the Dallas tried to trade for Jerami Grant and Pascal Siakam, which is in that same report from Shams Charania. Why would that report be out here right now? You think that helps maybe certain stars in the Dallas Mavericks organization feel more comforted that their team is doing everything they can to improve the roster? You think that adds a little comfort to a certain Slovenian playmaker? I do. I think maybe that's why that report's out there. But think about that. Why are the rumors out there? Who does it help? I'm not going to walk you through every one like I just walked you through that Mavericks report. I'm not going. No, this is only a light hand-holding podcast, but today we're doing a little heavier hand-holding. I want you to consider that all month long as we head up to the trade deadline. And two, the Blazers are primed to make a deal. They are primed to make a deal. They have waived 2 players to have only 13 players in the roster. They have to add a 14th person. Like, they're going to do something. They're going to do something. So it's coming. Like, and it's certainly going to be a Malcolm Brogdon trade at some point. But I think to consider when you're thinking about fake trades for the Blazers, think about what would the other team want from the Blazers and what would the Blazers want from them. As opposed to just Jonathan Kuminga, shiny new trade. It's like hard to pull those trades off. Think about them both directions. I think that's the key. Remember why stuff comes out this time of year, and think about what the Blazers would want in trades. Those are my 2 caveats as we get out of here. How about we come back tomorrow and do it again? How's that sound? Blazers play the Knicks on Tuesday evening in Madison Square Garden as Game 5 on their 7-game trip. We will recap everything we see in that one right here on the show. More shows this week. It's what we do 5 days a week wherever you get podcasts and also on YouTube. I appreciate you listening. I'll talk to you soon.